99% of all internet traffic, from this video to your Pokemon Go account to your family WhatsApp group, runs on a hidden network of undersea cables. Why should you care? Because modern life is increasingly dependent on those slinky subaquatic wires. And they get attacked by sharks from time to time. How do they work? What's the future for them? Join us today as we plunge the depths and ask how the internet travels across oceans.
Tech vision versus simply tech.
According to the authoritative Submarine Cable Map website, there are currently 493 active or actively under construction subsea internet cables crisscrossing the globe. These range from the relatively modest 300-kilometer Azerbaijan to Turkmenistan wire running under the Black Sea, to the absolutely gargantuan 6,600-kilometer Marea cable linking Virginia Beach in the US with Bilbao in northern Spain. Marea weighs the same as 24 blue whales, apparently. The firms laying down this serpentine superhighway. Worldwide, there's now 1.5 million kilometers of undersea data wires, are cagey about how much it all costs. But professional estimates indicate a typical transoceanic cable should set you back between $300 and $400 million, which seems like a lot because they're not especially thick, typically around the girth of a garden hose, and that includes layers of protective thixotropic jelly around the all-important fiber optic core, plus multiple plastic sheaths and copper wiring to power the thing. But even so, on average they can ferry an awesome 100 gigabytes per second in data, with newer and forthcoming cables able to transmit 400 gigabytes per second. So how does so much data fit down such slim channels? Part of the answer is an extremely sophisticated data wrangling technique known as dense wavelength division multiplexing. Put simply, dense wavelength division multiplexing lets data providers use more than one wavelength of light to convey information fiber optically. Instead, several wavelengths are employed simultaneously and stacked, creating astonishing data speeds. This happens at buzzing data center-like landing sites at either end of the cable. Are the cables just straightforward long wires? Not quite. Every 70 to 100 kilometers or so along the seabed, cables are punctuated with so-called repeaters. These essentially serve as amplifiers, keeping the signal strength up to par over long distances. That's why the cables incorporate copper conductors, by the way, carrying up to 10,000 volts of DC to power the repeaters. How are the cables laid? They're first coiled into vast cylindrical drums on specialized cable-laying ships. As much as a year's planning and charting will go into plotting the perfect transoceanic route. Bad locations for undersea cables include anywhere volcanic, or anywhere especially earthquake or mudslide prone, or anywhere heavily trawled by fishermen. The cable is spooled out the back of the ship at a sedate pace of around 10 kilometers an hour. If the ship encounters bad weather, the captain can decide whether to break off the cord, tie it to a buoy, and retreat to calmer waters. When the storm passes, the ship returns to the buoy and picks up where it left off. Accidents and outages on the cables can and do occur. In 2012, Hurricane Sandy in the US knocked out several key transatlantic cables, disrupting networks for hours. In 2011, the Fukushima earthquake in Japan caused similar online carnage. The vast majority of such disruptions, however, are the result of human carelessness, typically trawler nets or wayward ship's anchors. Cables situated close to the shore are significantly more at risk from such disruption. As such, the nearer to land a cable is, the more likely it'll be carefully armor-plated. Many are even dug into the seabed in long dedicated trenches, carved out using ship-drawn plows. Awesomely, sharks have been spotted nibbling on one of Google's subsea cables. Get your teeth into this 2014 clip. More sinister even than that, the US government has consistently warned of interference in the cables from hostile foreign powers like Russia or China. The US government should know all about that. Whistleblower Edward Snowden revealed in 2013 how the NSA had no qualms eavesdropping on fiber optic communications. The geopolitical implications of undersea cables are also fascinating. Last year, the Australian government intervened to prevent Chinese technology giant Huawei from installing a cable connecting Australia with the Solomon Islands. The fear is that China could use the link to gain access to Australia's sensitive internal networks. So who actually owns these cables? That's an interesting question. It's an expensive business, so historically nations or quasi-national telecom providers have picked up the bill. The world's biggest owner of cables remains America's AT&T, with a stake in some 230,000 kilometers of undersea cable. The second biggest owner is China Telecom. Frequently, cables are owned by groups or consortia of up to 50 separate owners, including tech firms, local government agencies, and other businesses. And while this model helps spread the initial cost, it's less helpful when something goes wrong and nobody can agree who has to put on a wetsuit and do something about it. Increasingly, big tech is recognizing its scope for growth is limited by the undersea cable network. So over the past few years, the overwhelming majority of investment in undersea cable infrastructure has come from companies like Facebook, which currently owns nearly 100,000 kilometers of cables. Google owns roughly the same amount. Amazon has its own massive private network, hooking up the online giant's mighty AWS data centers through cables traversing the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, plus the Mediterranean, and the Red Sea, and the South China Sea. The tech giants like to frame these vast environmentally disruptive infrastructure projects as civilization-enhancing largesse on their part. But they're also shareholder companies, remember, who know perfectly well that increasing the number of human beings online is the only way they can continue to grow. Hang on a second, you're probably thinking, what about Starlink? Isn't our old mate Elon about to make the internet wireless any day now? For now, cable is by far the cheapest and most efficient means of yeeting vast packets of data over incredibly long distances fast. Even normally bullish Musk says Starlink is only aimed at people who don't presently enjoy access to high-speed fiber. But who knows how that'll pan out in a decade or two. For now, the future is very much undersea cables. Only this summer, Google and Facebook announced a joint initiative to build an undersea cable named Apricot. Apricot will link up Singapore, Japan, Guam, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Indonesia by the year 2024. The longest subaquatic cable ever, a 45,000-kilometer billion-dollar monster called To Africa that will link up 33 nations, was just bankrolled by a Facebook-led consortium. What do you think? Will mankind's ingenious submarine network one day look as obsolete as the telegraph? Let us know in the comments.
No matter where you are located, almost all of your internet data is transmitted through a hidden network of undersea cables. In fact, 97% of all internet traffic runs through this hidden infrastructure of thousands of miles of fiber optic cables that zigzag our ocean floors. With our dependence on the internet increasing by the day, modern life is totally reliant on these subaquatic wires. But how do they work? And what is the future of internet communications? Also, how is it possible that your internet connection is almost always there? Don't these cables get destroyed by ships and sharks? In today's video, let us explore the depths and find out how the internet travels across oceans. The idea of transmitting signals through wires by connecting two land masses separated by an ocean is not new. The first ever undersea cable was laid in 1850 between Britain and France. Later, in 1958, the Atlantic Ocean was bridged. It is hard to imagine that we are still essentially using the same concept even after 170 years. These undersea cables are laid down by specialized ships called cable layers that hold thousands of miles of coiled cables on their decks. After charting a safe path, avoiding fishing zones, anchoring areas, fault lines, and other potential dangers, these ships navigate the course and slowly uncoil cable onto the ocean's surface. Buoys are used to keep the cables floating. Once the operators are satisfied, and the weather is right, they cut the buoys and allow the cables to sink to the ocean floor. Underwater technicians will follow its progress to make sure that the cables do not get tangled and are being laid in the right place. According to the submarine cable map of the world, as of 2021, over 436 subsea cable systems have been laid, crisscrossing all the major oceans and seas. Combined, that's over 800,000 miles of undersea cables operational today, twice the distance between our Earth and the Moon. But these are obviously not the same types of cables used a century ago. The modern subsea cables on which our wireless world rests are specifically designed to carry large amounts of data packets over long distances. These cables are rarely much wider than a garden hose, but at their core are many individual fiber optic threads, each carrying billions of bits of information per second. The fiber optics are sheathed in various layers of silicon, plastic, steel wiring, copper, and mylar. The design is optimized to provide insulation to the signal and protect the cable from damage from weather, man-made or natural events, or even wildlife. Yes, you heard that right. Ocean wildlife like sharks gnawing on a cable can cause major damage, and it has happened before to some of Google's cables. So I can't help but think a shark eating through cables would be a better game than Chrome's jumping dinosaur. Although by far, the most common cause of cable damage is accidental human activities, such as fishing vessels or ships dragging their anchors along the ocean beds. Damage to these cables can be caused by intentional human activity as well, like sabotage during times of conflict, or by transnational terrorism activities. However, such incidents are historically rare. But do not worry, your family WhatsApp group is in no danger. Companies that operate these cables follow a safety in numbers approach, spreading their networks over multiple cables. That way, if one breaks, it doesn't bring down the whole network with it. Anyways, we digress. Let us get back to the cables. The fiber optic threads are the secret sauce that makes these underground cables so successful. The theory governing this technology is known as total internet reflection. Similar to the way light is reflected between two glass surfaces, data signals are beamed down these subsea cables using the same principle and lasers. When the lasers from one end hit the glass fibers, it is reflected back up the length of the cable, traveling toward the receptors at the other end of the cable. This process is repeated over and over again at staggering speeds, maintaining the global chain of communications. And by bundling many fiber optic threads together in one cable, this form of data transmission can handle enormous amounts of traffic all at once. So how fast are these undersea modern cables, you might wonder? Well, the recently installed Maria transatlantic undersea cable, which became operational in 2018, is capable of carrying 224 terabytes of information per second along its 8 fiber optic pairs. As if this was not impressive enough, Facebook, or rather Meta, announced in late 2021 that it is contracting Japanese information technology giant NEC to make a transatlantic cable capable of transmitting at 0.5 petabytes per second. That is 500 terabytes, or 500,000 gigabytes per second. Facebook is also working on the largest subsea cable project in the world, connecting 33 countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, called 2Africa. It will stretch 45,000 kilometers, connecting 3 different continents, and has a design capacity of up to 180 terabytes per second at launch. Similarly, Google has also recently confirmed its high-speed subsea cable project, Equiano, which will run from Portugal to South Africa, connecting Nigeria along the way. Of course, this does not mean that you, the end user, will get this speed anytime soon, but it would definitely allow your internet service provider to up their game and offer even faster speeds and more reliable connections. Speaking of providers, let us look at the owners of these massive networks of undersea infrastructures that literally run our world. In the early days of the internet, existing undersea cable networks were already owned and operated by major telecom carriers, AT&T and BT, so they would lease out bandwidth to other players in the market. The decade of 1990 saw a major boom in the industry. Undersea cables began to attract investment from private companies. As the entire world slowly digitized itself, these companies specializing in underwater cable technology saw the potential of huge profits and started selling capacity to telecom companies whose traffic demands were soaring through the roof. In the last 2 decades, the landscape has changed yet again. Big tech giants such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Facebook are increasingly sponsoring their own undersea networks to match their customer needs. While telcos such as AT&T and BT still operate or have stakes in dozens of undersea cables, they have long stopped leading the charge in new and emerging markets. In fact, as of 2018, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft owned or leased more than half of all undersea bandwidth. Currently, Google alone owns 6 active submarine cables and plans to have 8 more ready within 2 years, while Facebook has stakes in 13 cables as part owner and is also developing their own. As storage and distribution of content increases and the old cables laid down in the 90s slowly approach their retirement age, we are again seeing a boom in the undersea cable industry. But hang on a second. You are probably thinking, what about satellite internet? What about Elon's plans with Starlink or Facebook's own satellite internet division? Isn't that the future of internet transmission? As it turns out, it is not. Or at least it won't be for the next few decades. There are a few technical limitations that face the satellite internet industry which need to be solved before it can become a viable option. First of all, the cost of launching satellites, launch cost, still remains astronomically high. Second, coverage demands that thousands of mini satellites be placed into low Earth orbit, covering the entire planet. Such densely packed constellations will exacerbate the problems of collisions and space debris. Third and final, due to the nature of their orbit, not every satellite will be in reach of a ground-based antenna all the time. This means that data packets need to be transmitted from one satellite to the next until it is in the range of a ground station. Satellite-to-satellite network hopping. This is a technical challenge that most companies are still grappling with. Only Starlink has managed to get the approval of launching 12,000 satellites in low Earth orbit. And then again, Elon has categorically stated that the company aims to provide internet to those users who currently do not have access to high-speed fiber. Thus, undersea cables still remain the most cost-effective and functional solution for high-speed internet transmission. That's why these tech giants are investing huge sums of money to lay newer and faster cables around the globe. But with the incessant march of technology, who knows what the future has in store for these vast networks under our oceans? What do you think? Do you believe that undersea cables are the future? Or are they in danger of becoming obsolete, just like the technology, telegraph, that spawned it 170 years ago? Let us know in the comment section below.
You made it to this point? That's amazing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and share for more videos like this. I am ICJ, and this is Amiable Media. Catch you in the next one.